building and construction.
Oh,
Wow.
sorry about that, Don. Go ahead.
Yeah. So pretty much all of my family and uncles and everything were in the construction trades. As a young kid, my father was already president of the local and then business agent and business manager. So, yeah, our lives were really centered around the unions and, ironworker picnics or, accompanying my father down to the union hall when the alarm went off in the middle of the night and that type of stuff. So
Yeah.
it was great. In fact, by the time I was in high school, I was already getting there iron worker hats and what have you, anxious to get out and get into the iron workers. That was my goal.
So that's kind of the next point I was going to kind of like get to was, so you already knew that you wanted to be an iron worker from a young age. That wasn't a question there, or obviously, did you think about doing anything else, or you just knew that you wanted to be an iron worker when you got to that point, out of high school or whatever it was?
I was interested in working outside. I did not have an interest in, furthering my studies. I really was anxious to get out of high school and get into the trades and start making money and, learning more about it firsthand as opposed to what I'd been told or heard about.
From your dad and uncle and grandpa and all that, obviously. What's your book number, Don? That's kind of one of the things that I like to ask everybody. What's your book number?
My book number's 1005753. I started work in October 21st, 1978, and then I was first initiated March of 79.
Okay. Nice. I mean, so you've been around a little while there. So like you said that your dad was already like business manager, business agent by the time you were still a young kid. He was kind of in the office running the local by then, huh?
Yeah, I was born in 59, and I think by 64 he was already president of the local.
Okay.
And then they had as I recall, they had a business agent passed away, and had somebody else interim fill the spot, and then the very next election he became business agent. So right around 64 he was off and running.
Okay. Was your grandpa pretty influential? I mean, was he pretty active in your childhood? I mean, was he always around? Did you guys were a close family, but did he talk about work like when you were a young kid? Did he like tell you the stories and all that kind of stuff as you were growing up?
A little bit. We'd hear stories about him. When I really began learning a heck of a lot about his career is when the bridges started having their 50th anniversary, 60th anniversary, 70th anniversary. And he, of course, would get invited to any celebrations or groundbreakings or parties. The politicians always like to, rub elbows with the working folks. And so if Bay Bridge, the Carquinez Bridges, whatever one was having a party, there was at the very least local state politicians, but also the governors and what have you. So, and because my grandfather was in very good physical shape still up until at least 85 years old, 90 years old, and mentally sharp, he was a good storyteller. He wasn't, no health issues or what have you. And he was pretty candid about, the good times and, what went on the job as well as off the job.
Yeah. So I was going to kind of eventually get into like talking about your grandpa and stuff, Don, but kind of just still with you. I mean, I'm obviously still curious about you. I mean, I consider you, just from what I know about you, just kind of like a mentor. I kind of look up how your career went and, kind of, trying to shape my career around things that you've done. But as a young journeyman, what was your mentality? I mean, were you Obviously, we're iron workers. Did you get a lot of shit from the guys, out on the jobs when you're, you just, as an apprentice and a journeyman, or did you just kind of, what was that early ironworking career like for you?
Well, I could tell you that probably anybody that's had an old man that was a business agent was probably, you know, probably look at a little side eye or suspicious of, is that kid out there just because his father was a business agent, or, has he got, talent and the drive and what have you. There was always some of that chatter. I remember some of it, but you prove yourself. If the contractor ain't going to keep you just because of your what have you, they might get you on a job once in a while, but they ain't going to keep you. So
No, absolutely not. Absolutely. Yeah, I totally 100% agree with you. Cause I mean, obviously you have to get the respect of the men. You're not going to get that respect if you're not working hard and you're just lumbing around and everything else. So,
yeah.
yeah, 100% agree with you.
So I was going to apprenticeship school when I first started, 2 nights a week at that time, down in Oakland at a college, and it was kind of sparse compared to the training facilities we have nowadays, where the training trusts own them and you've got all the equipment right there. We were utilizing college classrooms that they used during the day for English or math or science or whatever, and the teacher would get there a little bit early, open up a gang box and that was it. So it wasn't near the opportunities that the apprentices in almost every local throughout our international has nowadays. But shoot, I scored several jobs through my apprenticeship instructors. They said, you had to work. Oh yeah, well, why don't you come out here and what have you? So go back to the hall. They'd make a call and send me out. I remember at least a couple that really got me a start. And I'll let the anybody that I worked with, journeyman or otherwise, speak for my skill set. I worked quite a bit for 3 contractors, Romac, which was a miscellaneous outfit, Sheedy, a rigging outfit, Calorectors, a structural outfit. Those 3 combined to about, that might have been half of my years between those 3. Good company.
Yeah.
Great union.
Was your the way you guys did your apprenticeship, Don? Did you guys go to school after work? Or did you guys kind of how we do it? You go once a month. Is that how you guys did, or what? How was how did your guys' apprenticeship work at that time?
Right, back in the 70s, 80s, we went 2 nights a week to a college facility. So yeah, it was after work, and
so if you were quite a ways away, you're traveling, you had to get to class. Obviously, you had to go after work, and you could be yeah. So
you bet. Yeah, paid for a real long night because you didn't get out of class at 9 o'clock at night, and then you got to drive home. And at that time, I lived maybe about 45 minutes away from the college, but there were folks that lived farther than that. It was down in Oakland, where my local was based. So it was pretty centrally located, but it was still tough. After work, my burger on the way to school, and that's where you'd be till at least 9 at night.
Yeah. What were some of the big did you work on some big projects in your early years, Don? Did you get to work on any bridges or I'm not too familiar with the big jobs down in the Oakland area and the Bay Area, but what were some of the jobs that you got to work on as a young journeyman, as you turned out?
The only bridge work I worked on was the widening of a bridge from Benicia to Martinez. They put an additional lane on each side of it. I was on that job almost 2 years, over a year for sure, about the longest I've ever been on a specific project. And that was in the 80s. As a matter of fact, we had a big earthquake in October of 1989. And that was the project I was on at that time. And ended up working a whole bunch of overtime the day after the earthquake, making sure all the restrainer cables were on correctly, and what have you. The other significant project, I worked for Sheedy, jumping the tower crane on the stratosphere, the very final jump. The stratosphere in Vegas is over 1,000 feet high. And so the tower crane above it is obviously, another 100 or so of that. So that was nice. It was phenomenal for a journeyman ironworker to be sent to Vegas to work. And it was only I think about a week, but put me up in a hotel, and man, you talk about feeling like on top of the world. That was awesome. Good people.
I bet that would have been an awesome job to be on a jumping tower crane on the stratosphere. Holy smokes. Yeah, that's up there. I've been on all those rides up there. So I know, I mean, I can only imagine you're up there trying to, put new cabling on the boom or something, or on the jib. I'm like, you're up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's cool. So kind of the next thing I got here, Don, is like, you've been a journeyman for a while. Did you have those aspirations to be a leader in the local, and then, kind of just get into being an organizer or a business agent, business manager? When did you kind of start seeing yourself like moving towards that or wanting to do that type of work?
Even as an apprentice, I almost never missed union meetings. My father was a business agent at the time, and then later the business manager in the 80s. And my brother, the journeyman, he attended. My brother was a trustee for many years at the local level. So hardly ever hardly ever missed a union meeting. And they were in Oakland at that time. What got me initially interested is, to be honest, I didn't want some of the other folks that were vying for them positions making the decisions on the local level. And I actually found that true all of my career. There are folks that are opportunists that they might want a job on the e-board, so they'll be the steward on the big job, or they might, have different philosophies than I do. And I thought I was right, and I wanted my opinion to be initially first. Around 85 or 86, I was on the executive board and served a couple of terms there. Then ran for president and served 3 terms as president. But again, it was, if I'm not in that position, someone else is going to be. And in many cases, it's somebody with a little different philosophy. Organizing, for example, has always been my passion. And we have lots of folks in all levels of local unions throughout our international that really just don't get it, they don't see it my way. And in my opinion, they don't get how important organizing is, and how valuable and how vital it is to our whole existence, and
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where,
I butted head. My grandfather was on the examining board years ago. He wasn't very politically involved, but he was on the examining board at the local. And he told me, I'm probably, just starting out on the executive board, what have you. And he recalled arguing with fellow members to allow someone to become your member. It sounds silly to many of us, but we still have those debates in local unions. Should we let them in? Should we let them transfer? Should we even organize them? To me, it's ridiculous. And that argument has been going on since at least, probably since 1896. But my grandfather, I remember him relaying a story that he had. He says, for crying out loud, the guy is already a top hand. Let him in. Sometimes it was racial. Mexicans or whatever ethnicity, blacks, and not a whole lot of African Americans in our local back in the day. So anyways, that was my passions, and it always has been. And I've been in at least half the states in this United States, and I can guarantee you there's a lot of people still out there that don't embrace it, and it's a shame. It's very it makes it that much more difficult, because even if everybody is on the same page, organizing is difficult. If you've got somebody that's half-assed, doesn't believe in it, or they're just going through the motions, well, it's going to be a very, very difficult climb.
Absolutely. Yeah. Organizing is, it's one of my passions also. I mean, I have not, I mean, I love doing ironwork, but I've never had that feeling of helping somebody out and then, actually, getting them involved in our union. And then, like a year later or whatever, some time later, they just come up and say, thank you. That feeling right there is just like the best thing I've ever experienced in my entire life, just that helping of someone and then getting them to understand what the union's about and what we offer and how we can make your life better. So I 100% agree with you. And it's just, it kind of breaks my heart, like what you're saying, like there's some people that just don't get it. You know what I mean? It's like, like what you said about your grandfather saying that, who cares? He's a top-notch hand. Let him in. What does it matter? He's going to be one of us. So what is the whole point of like, well, I don't know if we're going to let him or transfer in or whatever it may be. I still don't get that. And I still see that, going through the union meetings and all that as of right now. And it's weird that we're still talking about that stuff, but it's still here. And it just kind of mind boggling, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's been around since since the dawn of time, but people, I don't know, maybe feeling better about themselves by putting somebody else down. You'll hear the comments of, I can't hardly understand them and what have you. Maybe that's English is not their first language, what have you. My grandfather told me a story when he was in his 80s. You asked earlier about seeing my grandfather. Well, I lived right down the street from him. So
Okay.
I saw him daily. And then later when I was growing up, and then later when I was in the trade and single, and oftentimes I'd stop off on the way home. I'd see his truck parked. He'd shoot pool and have a beer every day at local haunts. And so I'd stop in and, shoot the shit with him, shoot a game of pool or what have you, have a beer with him. So I was able to spend a lot of one-on-one time with him. And I remember in his 80s, him telling me a story about how his father had come over from Italy to work at a smelter in Selby, California. And then when he got sick, his lungs got congested or something. Well, they just laid him off. There was no protections or what have you. So he had to go to work anywhere he could. He'd be doing gardening. He was, voluntarily being a porter at the train station, just helping people with their bags, hoping for tips. He wasn't employed. He was just down there hustling. And my grandfather remembered seeing a guy abuse him verbally, his father, because he couldn't speak English very well. I imagine I never met my great grandfather, but he probably barely spoke English. And, to some guy, that meant he must have been stupid. And, I thought, wow, if that stuck with my grandfather for 70 years or so, because my grandfather was a young child at the time that it happened, that really left an impression on him. And of course, I saw it all the time in my trade. A person's ignorant because their English isn't very good. And we know that there are engineers, scientists, chemists, doctors, lawyers in every country in the world that don't speak English. So there's intelligent people out there that just don't speak our language. It's arrogant to think otherwise.
Well, it just shows you how ignorant people can be. It's like, come on, you know what I mean? And just the tribalism that's kind of going on in the world right now is just kind of a weird thing. But I mean, that's a whole nother subject that we can get into. But
Yeah.
just continuing with like your career, Don. I mean, like, you came in, you said you got on the executive board for a couple terms and president and all that. Then you made the switch over to the business manager. I mean, what was that like for you? Obviously you were there to help make your local stronger and build it up and everything else. Is that kind of what your whole idea was as you were going for business manager?
Yeah, actually, as I was president, a working president in my local, elected in 91 and several terms after that. But our district council, California council at the time, was really pushing organizing, really getting the local unions. So when I became president, I also became a district council delegate. And the push was on to get every local to have an organizer or have two or what have you. So in 1995, my business manager, Jim Pruitt, we knew him as Pineapple. He hired me as an organizer in 95. Prior to that, the district council decided that teaching Comet to each local and getting each local to have Comet trainers was important. I and a district council employee, Keith Hunter, would go around on the weekend. We'd go up to Reno and teach a Comet class. First, obviously, we had to get taught this Comet. And we went to the George Meany Center in Washington, D.C. to get this training. Then we came back, then we go to Fresno another weekend. Then we go to LA, we go to Arizona. So I had traveled around the council a little bit teaching these organizing classes while I was an iron worker in the field. We would just do this on the weekends. And then my business manager, like I said, he hired me as a full-time organizer, and my eyes opened because I thought, as great of a trade as this is, the people are going to be lined up trying to come in. Well, I found out in a hurry that, there was a lot of people that didn't trust us, that believed that, well, they could join the union, but then they'd be out of work because only the favorites go to work and the hall's always full. And the employer, if he's anti-union, he's got that employee 8 hours a day or more. He's got them captive. We'd go out there, me as an organizer, go out there and talk to him maybe 5 minutes, or try to get his phone number to talk to him later, or meet him after work for 10 minutes. He might give me 10 minutes of his time, but it was a lot tougher than I thought. So later on, when I became business manager, I definitely was, had the passion, and we put on 2 organizers, and we probably went through 5 or 6 of them, because some we realized they weren't, they sounded good, what have you, but it just didn't work out. They weren't the right people. But, and at one time, our council in California had something like 21 organizers in the locals, that I think the district won, and the locals had like 20 amongst them. So it was awesome.
Yeah, I met some when I went down there for that organizers conference. It's been a few years now, I think like 3 years. I met some really awesome, the district council, California district council organizers, and some of the local guys. I mean, just mind blowing. Those guys were badass. I learned a lot from that conference. Just one of the things that I remember is that we kind of did like this role playing kind of thing. And I was never that kind of, at that time, just to do that kind of stuff just wasn't, I just wasn't comfortable with that. And everybody got me out of that comfort zone, just watching those guys just do it. And that's just kind of what this job, sometimes you got to do things that aren't comfortable, right? You got to go talk to people that may be pissed off, or, start screaming, whatever it may be, you know what I mean? And yeah, I just met a lot of great guys down there. I mean, organizers were top notch down there.
Well, just like anything we're passionate about, when we get around like-minded people, it's invigorating, right? It recharges your back. Oh, thank goodness, because it's not difficult to find people that disagree with us on a weekly basis. And, many times, worker out in the field that we're trying to help, I remember guys flipping me off and cussing me out. And to this day, I remember a particular guy that worked for this non-union contractor, and we chased and tried to organize for years, finally became signatory, and we took in dozens and dozens of his employees, of course, his iron workers also. And that guy, I remember him reminding me. I didn't need to be reminded. I remembered how he treated me each time I went out on the job. He says, "But you kept coming back." It was a great sense because I had to suck it up. Every time I pulled in that parking lot, I said, "Oh, it's that asshole. It's Al.
Yeah.
Al and job." But all that time, I think he himself didn't believe that he would do better as a union iron worker. I don't know that he was so opposed to the guys in the gang becoming, but I guess he felt it was his duty to be the company rep and tell me to screw off or what have you. But anyways, I hope
Yeah.
I haven't seen the guy in years, but it brought back memories that God, yeah, sometimes you just got to suck it up and get back out there. And
Absolutely. And another thing that I wanted to mention is like, we have that iron worker mentality, you know what I mean? Sometimes it can be hard for us to control our emotions as far as when somebody's, screaming and yelling at you, but it's just, you got to work through that, and that's one of the other things that I've been able to embrace and learn is to actually, not to understand my emotions better and keep them in check so I don't go to that point where it's like, you just let it all go. But that's another big thing that I've learned from organizing. Is just trying. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that didn't mean that I come back as an president of the local and be embraced. There were plenty of outbursts at union meetings that accused me of selling books or or bringing in the wrong people. I get a pop quiz out of the blue. Some guy would say, "This guy come in, he's a journeyman, he ain't worth the shit." But so wait a minute, can you give me his name? I'll follow up on it. Many times they assumed that the person that was organized came in as a journeyman when most came in as apprentices, but they knew he was organized, and that's all they knew. So, a month later, you get another union meeting. Same guys aren't even there to defend, and you could follow up on that story. Also, there were plenty of business agents throughout the different local unions that did take the opportunity to get somebody in and call it organizing that was really not an iron worker. I organized. I didn't go to the buddy at the bar, say, "Hey, we're organized. I'll get you a book. You how to hook up a torch." But unfortunately, the organizer was the one that took the blame. In fact, that I didn't even know that had come in. I would have no way of knowing. I'm out on the job sites. I didn't know who was getting dispatched every day and who was being told, "Just tell them you got to organize," that type of thing. So those things go on in locals, believe it or not. And unfortunately, sometimes the organizer or the organizing plan gets the blame when in fact that they don't have anything to do with that. But we had internal struggles as to whether we should organize and then who we should organize. And, as you know, those go on today. And
that's kind of leads me to my next question, Don. Like, how did you, like when you were a business manager, how did you get your membership to understand, like if we bring in somebody who's organized, because we still have that issue. If we bring in an organized person, they get shit out on the jobs. They just get treated like shit. They're just like, they're this pariah that nobody wants to deal with. They're, a lot of people do that. Not everybody. So I want to make sure that that's clear. Not everybody. So a lot of guys take in and embrace the organized people that we've just brought in, but we still have those people that, like you were talking about, that don't want them here, don't want to teach them our ways, and just don't have time for them. How did you get your membership to how did you deal with those issues and to get your membership to understand that we need to teach these people our ways, and it's only going to make us better?
Well, I'd be lying if I claimed that we had everybody behind us. One thing was for certain: by the time I became business manager, there was no one that didn't know that I was 100% behind organizing. I mean, I'd probably been talking about it at every union meeting for, 10 years or so. So they knew that. So even the non-believers might, nod their head the right way when I was around, what have you. And I think what works the best, and it's not foolproof, is as much time anyone, whether it's the organizer or the journeyman that was organized, that can help break down that barrier and just understand. As you're saying, some people want to, disregard them or treat them different. Some want to truly put them to the physical test and drive them into the ground, and they'll say, they couldn't cut it, when they wouldn't do that to their nephew or their niece or their own brother, but they do this unknown person. So I think it took and still takes, one-on-one. Nobody was born an iron worker, giving that person a chance. Obviously, doesn't matter if you're first generation, second, third, fourth, or this is your first job in the union. Some are cut out for it and some are not. It's not 100%, no matter what. We could spend enormous amount of time and money trying to evaluate and test and see and interview folks to see if they're going to be the right folks. But the true test is out on the job. If you're making that money and you're able to produce and be productive, doesn't matter what your personality is or who that are, that them bolts, that welding, it doesn't make a difference who you are. You got to get it
Exactly.
done.
Exactly. Yep. I mean, I can always work with somebody who tries, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter where they come from, who they are, as long as I can see somebody trying, I'm there to teach them. I'll help anybody out that I can see that's at least trying, you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I think that's for a lot of people. That's all they want to see is trying.
Yeah, we all know plenty of folks that had opportunities and they go their own way. It didn't work out, and they may tell their friends and family some other story why it didn't work out, but deep down they realized it wasn't for them, and it's not for everyone. And some great mechanics, and some are great welders, and some are great iron workers, and a whole lot of people aren't. So it's given a person.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the next thing I got here, Don, we talked a little bit, just kind of, I didn't want to take up your whole night, but, just start talking about your grandpa. Kind of the first question, so this last week, I actually bought a book, that by, John Robinson, about your grandpa. And I read that this last week just to kind of brush up my understanding of who your grandpa was, and, to have some more facts, and just to kind of maybe, throw some questions at you that I kind of got from the book, and it really didn't explain it very well, and things like that. So kind of the first question, like, what was your grandpa like, and like, what was his personality? He was born in the early 1900s. He lived in his parents were immigrants, like you said, came from Italy. I think the east of Rome, or I think that's what I read. I may be mistaken there. He just had a lot of things growing up as a young kid, with all that, like you were talking about. Your great grandfather worked at a smelting plant in Selby, California. Is that what it? Yeah. And had to deal with all those racial tensions and all that, and that's kind of, it really didn't give a good understanding of like your grandpa's personality, and what type of person he really was.
Well, I'll tell you, to sum it up briefly, he was a competitor in everything he did. In his 80s, I told you I'd shoot pool with him or what have you. He'd chew my ass if I lost to him. He'd chew my ass if I beat him. But he was as a young man, he fought in what they called smokers. I guess the winner might have won $2 or $5 or something like that. And was a tough guy. He loved baseball. He went on to coach baseball teams and was very competitive. Many years ago, they had a little reunion of some of his the folks that were the kids on the Little League team, and they told great stories of how competitive he was as a coach. But yeah, very competitive, wanted to be the best at whatever he was doing. I mentioned that he was born in '05. His father lost his job at the smelter that he came over from Italy to work at, and had some very hard times. So he was running a butcher shop at a very young age with another guy in his hometown area of Crockett. And unfortunately, they couldn't keep up. This was, around 1922 or so. And, probably 7 or 8 butcher shops in that little town. There's only 3,500 people in the whole town. But he had to close up. And he was telling his customers as they'd come in, you got to settle up your tab because we're going to close down. And one of his customers was driving pile right there in his hometown for this new bridge that was going to go in. And he asked him if he'd like to come to work down there. And my Gramps, as I called him Gramps, he said, well, I never done construction. The guy says, well, you're in great shape. You're physical. Come on, give it a shot. And might not work out. So he did go down there, and he ended up helping run the boats. My grandfather also had at one time a commercial fishing license, what have you. So he helped run the boats, drive the pile, hang the iron, and turned age 21 on that job. It opened in 1927 and was the first span across the bay in the Bay Area. It was a huge connection to go from Oakland to Sacramento, for example. Prior to that bridge, the cars and anything else had to go across on ferries. So it was a big thing. Well, he traveled with that company, the bridge company, down the river towards Stockton and worked on a couple more bridges. The San Joaquin Little River Bridge and Middle River Bridge is what they were called at the time in the 20s.
Yep.
First son was born in 27 out in Stockton, out in the valley. He stuck with them and went down to Texas. He worked sand hogging, which is down underneath the pier, digging out the muck and the mud and the rocks. Because in them days, you want to work on the bridge, you did it all. Working on the piles, doing the rigging, doing the sand hogging, whatever they wanted them to do. Went over to Arizona, Southern California, Oceanside Pier. Unfortunately, in the 30s, there was a gap in there, and he ran fishing boats. But in the 30s, big projects came to the Bay Area, the Oakland Bay Bridge. He went to work on that in 1934 and was working on the towers began going up the Golden Gate Bridge, and you could see it from the Bay Bridge.
Yep. And
he and his whole gang drug up and went to work on the Golden Gate Bridge. My grandfather said that he knew that it would be a much more monumental bridge, what have you. So he went to work out there, became a member of Local 377 in San Francisco, and was making great money. Most of his hometown worked at the C&H sugar factory there. It's still going in Crockett. And, he said that he was making something almost twice in a day what the average factory worker was making there. So he was doing, quite well and having a great time. He said that in them days, making that kind of money, he was like the major league ball players are now.
Yeah.
The gin mills and anybody that was at the gin mills knew that them guys were, hard workers, but also making good money.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's kind of what I read. He said that he was working on I don't pronounce that right. The Carquinez. How do you say that, Don?
Carquinez.
Carquinez Bridge, and he said, yeah, he could see the towers going up on the Golden Gate. Yeah, and then he drug up and went over to that job. And then he was obviously a connector. And then because you talked about he was a coach, and that was going to be one of my questions too. Is that picture that you showed me. I actually went in there and got a better shot of that picture. Your grandpa was jacked in those days. I mean, he was just, man, he was a bull. I mean, he didn't look like a guy you wanted to mess with.
No, and he was pretty, confident, to put it politely.
Yeah.
A connector would, no, I've never met a connector that was completely bashful. They've
Yeah.
got to have to get out there on that iron. And as we know, people don't leave that confidence in the gang box when they leave the job. So he always had that drive. Yeah, he was almost as broad shouldered as he was tall in them days. Some old timers that I knew, from the same hometown, they said that his nickname was Husky. And he was, like you said in that picture, he was stout and he was a fighter. And, so he wasn't afraid to take it outside. And I'm talking into his 70s, into his 80s. He didn't take shit. He had that drive and that confidence. And, very competitive as a coach, as an iron worker. He was very happy that in the 50s, they decided to build a second Carquinez Bridge right there in his hometown. And shoot, by that time, he's in his 50s. So he's nearing the end of his career, but he got to work out there, and both of his sons, my uncle and my father, worked with him on that job. So it was a great sense of pride. He was right there in his hometown. There's no doubt in my mind he stopped off at at least one gin mill on the way home from work to let everybody know, what they were building and what's going on. So that was a real prideful moment for him. And that bridge opened up in 1958, and that's around the time my father started in the ironworkers.
Okay. Yeah. So like, just kind of get back to like the Golden Gate, so he's working on the Golden Gate connecting, and then obviously the infamous story that, your grandfather's part of the Halfway to Hell Club. I mean, did he ever tell you, like, they, in that book, they kind of give you like his description of it, but was there what was his perspective towards like how you heard it when he told you that story the day that he went in the hole? I mean, is it basically what he said? I mean, is there anything different that that nobody else knows?
No, he did tell the story a time or two. He had an old leather and metal brace that he wore, kind of like a flak jacket thing, that he had cracked his several vertebrae in his pelvis. And so probably even as a young kid, he said, well, that was from when I, cracked my back and what have you. And so I drove him to many of his interviews with different folks, news teams or celebrations or dinners or events. And so I heard the story probably more than most, but he said when he slipped, he had stepped down and he kind of stepped out, not just straight down, and hit a slippery spot and, went in the hole, but he wasn't afraid because of the net. He just figured he's going to bounce up like it was a trampoline. Well, it was too close to the Marin rocky shore, and it wasn't taut enough to, so it sagged and it hit. And he said when he finally stopped, he was in, real pain, spent time at the hospital, what have you. And the guys, of his coworkers chided him that he'd probably never be able to work iron again because, once you go in the hole, you're going to be afraid. And he told me and everybody else the same story, that he went right back out to the bridge rather than go home because he wanted to kind of walk around and see if what they were saying was true. Well, he found out that it wasn't. It was in your head. It wasn't just because his back wasn't totally healed up yet didn't mean he couldn't walk the iron, what have you. And I may have told you this, but he connected on his very last day at age 65 on his very last job. I've talked to a number of iron workers that worked with him on that, and it was a source of pride for him to connect because he was leaving because he could leave and he could get his pension, not because he had to, not because he couldn't do the work anymore. And so that was one of his ways of making sure everybody at least on that job knew that see you guys around. I ain't leaving because I can't cut it.
So was your grandpa like basically just kind of worked in the gang when he was, obviously he didn't always do bridges, but when he was just doing out, doing, ironwork, structural ironwork, I mean, was he just in the gang most of the time hooking on, or was your grandpa ever, was he ever like a foreman? Did he ever want to do like be a leader out on the job, run a gang or run a job or whatever it may be?
Yeah, he did. He ran some crews, usually small, some rigging jobs. He did some riveting, what have you. And yeah, he'd run a crew when he had the right guys, and he could, just like anybody else. The hands
Yeah.
that you'd like, gang. And if you had that opportunity, he told me a story down at the hall where they had a call in there and they couldn't hardly get guys to go for whatever reason. Maybe the company had a bad reputation or what have you. And the business agent come out and asked him, he said, Al, man, if you take that job, these guys will go to work. They don't want to go to work. They're afraid of this reputation or what have you. But if they say you take it, they'll go. And he says, yeah, okay, well, if I get to pick one or two of them to go with me, let's go. Because if you're in the right gang, things go great.
Yep.
Some of the best times of my career in the field were also the most productive. I did a lot of hooking on. I wasn't a connector. I wasn't a top-notch weld, but I wasn't a top-notch welder. But a whole lot of hooking on for the structural outfits. And man, it was just a great feeling, a competitive feeling. You're running your butt off all day, but you get a lot done. And it's a real great feeling to see how much you get done.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the best part when you're working in a gang that you just know each other's moves and you don't have to say shit. You just know everybody knows their job and what they need to do. And it's just so smooth. And your foreman he's making up lists in the head knocker and just that kind of stuff. Those are the best jobs to be on, obviously.
Yeah. And beauty of my trade is our trade. So we work with some of the greatest folks out there. I worked with folks that, would have been top-notch connectors or welders anywhere in the two countries, you could anywhere and they'd have been top-notch. In fact, a lot of them were travelers. My grandfather said, like on the Golden Gate Bridge, a whole lot of folks from all over the country came out. And of course, that was in the 30s. Tough times were tough in most parts of the country. And, he said the same thing. Got to work with some of the greatest people, not just greatest ironworkers, some of the greatest people I've ever known.
Yeah, that's kind of like it's funny that you mentioned that, Don, because when I've talked to these old timers here that worked on the Astoria Bridge, I mean, like the last true bridgeman, they said that when that bridge started, the bridge company they brought their top-notch bridgemen from all over the country, and then a lot of guys heard that this was probably going to be the last rivet job. So they all came in into Oregon and tried to get on that job, or they did get on that job. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what they said is that, you would meet some of the greatest hands and they'd be from Oklahoma or Florida or whatever it was, just top-notch bridgemen.
You bet. And remember, I don't know what year that bridge you're referring to was. What year was that?
It started in 62, 62 and opened up in 66.
One of the things I would remind our members as they would be questioning the skills of the folks we're organizing, I would remind them that in our area, nobody went through an apprenticeship, didn't even start until around the late 50s. So 100% of the iron workers prior to that time never had any formal training. Yep. Did they do great work? Did they build great bridges? Absolutely. Top hands, right? Yep. So it didn't necessitate somebody to have a diploma, degree, or shingle, whatever, to be a good iron worker. It's the best way to learn on the job and then have some guidance after and for a week at a time as we do them most of the time now. It's optimum, but it isn't the only way.
Yep. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you learn from the teachers that are teaching you on the job. I mean, that's how I learned. I mean, I wasn't really that great into school and I didn't really, I wasn't the best at it, but I always, when I was out on the job, I had some great mentors out there, getting my chance to connect or whatever it may be, just being around some great hands that actually taught me, a lot of things. Obviously I didn't try to work for the same company all the time. I always try to spread, to gain knowledge from everybody. But yeah, that's exactly how it was.
Right. And when our apprenticeship classes started back in the late 50s, long before my time, but in my father's era, my uncle's era, the instructors were iron workers that had no formal training, right? He had an instructor by the name of Harold McLean that came out. He worked on the Empire State Bridge building. He came out and worked on the Golden Gate Bridge. He was an instructor extraordinary. He was a master craftsman, and he had no formal training. He was probably a real good reader, and paid attention, and worked around some folks that showed you the ropes, and that what they did in their day compared to the mechanisms we have now. Our rigging is massive, but they did everything one piece at a time, and they had to make their own chokers and do their own rigging. And so anyhow, it's point is
kind of
90% on the job.
Exactly. And that's kind of like one of the sayings from that book that your grandpa said about being a bridgeman. It's 90% guts and 10% know-how. You know what I mean? Because I mean, they did some crazy stuff, but I mean, I can only imagine, like being up on the towers, because I read in the book also that your grandpa would, they would jump the derrick, at the top of the tower, and he would climb up to the top of the jib. That's obviously, 1,000 feet or whatever it was. I think the towers are like 700 or something. I don't quote me on that, but then you're over water. It's a different type of, it's a different feeling, you know what I mean, than being on a structural building.
Right. And, obviously you can't just get there. Then you got to work. Oh, out here and holding on with both hands. Well, you ain't going to get nothing done. So, in fact, he said that on the Oakland to San Francisco Bay Bridge, that it was common that, a lot of people out of work and wanting a job, they'd say, yeah, go on up there, get on up that tower. And the foreman's up there. They'd tell a prospective person that wanted a job, climb up that tower. That would eliminate some of the applicants right there, that they or wouldn't. Well, then you're not gonna make it. So that would eliminate some right there.
Yeah. So kind of one of the other things I got here down is, did your grandpa really like that your dad and your uncle became ironworkers? Was that something that he wanted for them, or was that, like how most fathers, you kind of want something better for your kids, but was your grandpa, very approving of your dad and your uncle becoming ironworkers?
Yeah, he took a lot of pride. My grandmother did not want them to. She feared for their safety, and she had seen, my grandfather got hurt and what have you. But he had a great sense of pride in that. And then also a number of us in the next generation went in too. He was, real proud. And he was, he was a good hand, and he had a lot of respect amongst the members. So he was extremely helpful and supportive in the local, because he was well respected, even though he wasn't really politically involved. My grandfather was not. Heck, they respected. They knew that my grandfather was not going to put up with bullshit and half-assed. He whether it was baseball, like I said, no matter what he did, he expected, top. And so it absolutely helped my father's career. And my uncle at one time was the president of the local, and my father was the business agent at the same time. And not obviously they, not 100% people supported him. No election is that way, but they had a lot of respect because they knew my gramps and the members would keep them accountable. And
because your grandpa probably didn't take any, like your grandpa, like just kind of what I've read and like what you're saying, like he wasn't going to deal with like his sons being, just kind of just lumbing it around. He was seeing like he's going to make them work. Like when they worked on the second phase of the, on the bridge in 58 or I think it was 57, obviously I guarantee you he made them work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they were never going to shame the name at all. They were not that reputation whatsoever. It was no different than, me and my brothers in school. We get in trouble in school or in the neighborhood. Believe me, we were more afraid of my father finding out what he was going to do than what the teacher, the principal, or the police were going to do. He believed holding you accountable, and whether it was on the job or what have you. Like I said, I've got a lot of compliments from iron workers that I worked with, and I worked with a guy over in San Francisco for about a week. We were working partners, and one day the foreman says, "Okay, hey Frank, I want you and Zampa to go over to that area over there. I'm going to have you do these cables or what have you, and you guys go over here." And Frank says, "Who's Zampa?" And the foreman pointed to me. He'd been working with me a week, but we didn't lead with our name.
Yeah.
And he told that story. Frank told that story decades later. That we couldn't even know who the hell he was. I'd rather have him speak for me, and rather have him speak for me than me.
Yeah.
We got plenty of folks that wear the shirt and the buckle and the hat, and probably can't, keep up with aren't near as productive as they might think they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of the next thing I got here, you talked about your grandmother. What was she like? Obviously she had to go through, your grandpa was always gone. I mean, I kind of read when you mentioned that he went to Texas for American Bridge. She followed your grandpa with, I think your Uncle Gene was born, and they lived in a tent down there for some time. And obviously she was a tough woman too. She had to have been to be an iron worker's wife. You know what I mean? So what was she like? Was she obviously a strong woman?
A real tough woman. She had actually left an earlier marriage too, which was in a very small town.
Yeah.
Left her first husband and hooked up with my grandfather. And when he left the first Carquinez Bridge and went down to the San Joaquin, she went with him. And that's where they had her son, Gene, and then went with him to Texas and lived in a tent. And, very tough gal. And as tough as my grandfather was, he knew my grandmother was tougher,
Yeah.
So great.
That's usually how it is.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
He knew better than to anger her, but crazy about each other for 80 years, whatever, however long they're together. And it was good match, and a great lady. And I was fortunate. I lived right down the street and got to spend a lot of time there. And great woman, just like my wife. My mom was fantastic supporter of my father, but always behind the scenes. She never got involved. My father was very involved politically. 1968 convention was in New York, and my uncle and my father both went as delegates, and my mom and my aunt went. My mother never went to another one. She just didn't, she it was kind of funny because as high up as my father went, and she was unimpressed with all his titles. She liked him as a man and his credibility, integrity, is, what have you. But, don't tell me your title around here.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't mean shit around here.
Leave that at the door, big shot. Obvious love and support, but, that's not what impressed her. That's not what drew her to my father. My father was a big athlete in school, in all county football, baseball, tough guy. And when he first met my mother, he told his story many times. He's at a dance, and they've got a big cutout of him and his football uniform up on the stage, and his number. And, he's one of the, the big show on campus. And he says, think of the football team. She says, "Oh, do you play?" Oh my God. And it just did, she was in the band. She, again, day one, unimpressed with that. If you're a good person and treated her right, that's what counted, not your title or your ego.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of my wife. She's doesn't give a shit about any of that. I mean, she's always in the scene or behind, just being supportive. So, I mean, that's a true iron worker wife. You know what I mean? every person that I've talked to, just kind of like these old timers, you know what I mean? They always talk about their wives. They're like, they're always supportive. They're just that certain type of woman that just understands what we do and what we got to do.
Right. Yeah. And myself included, I
Yeah.
traveled this amount of
Yep.
time. I worked for, about 8, 9 years with a regional local that covered 21 states.
Yeah.
I was flying, 50 round trips a year.
Yeah.
So obviously a very supportive wife, and my daughter was born in '02. So she was just a young child. My wife raised her, did about 85% of the raising.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It would,
So,
I
uh,
done my job successfully and did it without that support. If I had grief and stress added at home, it wouldn't have worked out.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree with you on that, Don, because I mean, that's just like, you got to deal with a lot at work and everything else. And it's awesome to come home and have a supportive person here to just kind of say, to allow you to vent and whatever it may be that you're going through, and just be supportive about what you're doing or what you're trying to do, what your goals are and all that stuff. So that's super awesome.
Right.
So just kind of, I got a few more things here, Don, and I'll, let you get off of here. But, so your grandpa retired in 1970, and was it just because he wanted to just enjoy the rest of his life and enjoy the fruits of his labor, or was it because he just kind of knew it was time, or what was it?
I think he absolutely wanted to enjoy his free time. He'd go play the pony, the horse races
Yeah.
then he didn't have to worry about, it's not like he took any vacations or anything, but he wanted his free time is the way I recollect it.
Did he have any like hobbies? You said he like, he'd go gamble on the ponies and stuff, but did he have any hobbies that he got into in his retirement years that you can
Nothing
remember?
different.
Yeah.
Nothing different. Shoot pool. He watched baseball. He was an avid baseball fan. And
Was he a Giants fan?
yeah, A's and
Yeah.
Giants
Yeah.
both. He didn't go to many games at all.
Oh, really?
But he'd watch them on TV and complain of, different things that he'd see that the coach may have messed up, what have you. He was sharp.
Yeah.
Shoot pool, have a beer, bullshit with the locals. He grew up there since born in '05 and
Yeah.
knew everybody. And, just gardened a lot. Did always had a garden every year, but nothing
Yeah.
major. Major
No.
hobbies. Active every single day. He was never
Yeah.
sedentary.
Yeah. I could totally see that just from the footage that I've seen of him on YouTube and things like that. You know what I mean? And so like, what did he think of his like, so kind of there towards the end of his life that you were talking about, they started having all these anniversaries about the bridges that he worked on. What did he think about like his celebrity status at that point? I mean, did he really give a shit about it, or was it just obviously, you talk about the type of person he was, he's a very confident person and, and in the book, it talks about how, Joseph Strauss has a statue at the foot of the Golden Gate Bridge, but your grandfather said that there should have been a riveter there also because they were an important part of the bridge also. But did he enjoy the celebrity status there at towards the end, or was it just kind of like something to keep him busy? I guess
He very much appreciated it. If we go to an interview or an event, and again, I took him to quite a few. If it was something in the morning, he'd make sure he'd go by a couple of the local gin mills and let them know, hey, watch Channel 4 tonight. I'm gonna be on. And yeah, he was very proud of it and excited that he felt the working man was finally getting the recognition that they deserved. He so around the year 2000. Yeah, it was 2000. They're finally going to do a groundbreaking to build a new Cortina span, and it's going to replace the first one he ever worked on. So they have a groundbreaking, and they got our Congressman George Miller was there, going to be there, and my father had to talk him into attending. He wasn't feeling great. He was 95, and his legs were bothering him. He wasn't as mobile, and my dad talked him into it, picked him up, brought him there, and he attended. And they've got photos of him, with a shovel doing the groundbreaking. And well, shoot, he passed away a couple of weeks later, and it was about a year later that they decided to name the bridge after him. It wasn't decided at that time, but
that had made your family super proud. You know what I mean? I can only imagine. I mean, I think he was well deserving of that, just of everything I've read about him. You know what I mean? Super deserving to have that bridge named after him. Basically built that city.
Yeah, and because he was kind of the iconic bridgeman, like I said, anytime there was a celebration, number one, he worked on just about every bridge in the area. So anytime they had a celebration, they'd say, we got to get Zampa there. Plus, like I said, he was sharp and he was a good storyteller. So any event, they'd want to, let's get Zampa. So he became, iconic with building bridges and what have you. And that was the purpose of that naming, is not so much specifically him, but representative of the folks that, make their construction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just it's a beautiful bridge. I remember going over it when I was down working in California several years ago. It's just a beautiful bridge, going down through California. I forgot exactly where I was going, but yeah, beautiful bridge, and well deserving, and that's cool to hear that that's kind of what it was basically about, just to show, to give pride to the working man. And it wasn't, like you said, like a symbolic thing just for Al Zampa. It was for everybody that's been a bridgeman or in labor and everything else.
Right. And they're right there in his hometown. It's really, because it's replacing the very first bridge he worked on. It's right next door alongside the bridge he worked on with his sons. And,
absolutely.
Seldom that we worked in our hometowns,
Exactly. Yeah, he got two big projects right there in his hometown, which was, get up and go to work and go have lunch at the house and come back or whatever it may be. And then also too, I wanted to throw out there, Don, is that, they actually made a play after your grandfather, the Ace. Were you able to attend that when that first came out?
Yeah, I drove my grandfather to that attended and stuck around. We did some interviews there as well. I spent a lot of time with the author, the playwright, Isabel Maynard, because she would, she'd come out and interview my grandfather, and I'd talk to her, maybe point out some things that he might have missed or misunderstood what she was asking. And so worked with some of the actors on, no, you would never have your hand that way, giving a signal or something like that.
Yeah.
It was nice. It was,
what did you kind of take a look at him when he was actually seeing somebody kind of playing his life? I mean, was he just in awe? Like, man, I'm sitting here and somebody's actually portraying my life on the stage right now. Yeah,
he was very proud. He probably felt he could have done it better himself. But, to go over to San Francisco, this was right around the Golden Gate anniversary, the 50th. And lots of interviews and things like that. They had a bridge walk also that year, and hundreds of thousands of people, including me, my father, my grandfather, my brother, walked out on that bridge. It took the complete camber out of it. And
wow.
They said, engineers were beginning to worry that it had more weight on it than it had ever had in its history, because, 100 and something pounds per person, and it was shoulder to shoulder, chest to back out there. It was packed.
Wow.
Grandfather cussed us. He said, that was the stupidest thing we ever did, getting out back out, So he enjoyed it. Dumb that we walked out there in this big crowd, by that time he's 80 years old or so. So he wasn't too happy about the whole arrangement. But anyways, he's very proud of that play. And, somebody would take the time to, somehow this lady heard this story and decided, man, this guy's you know, when she met him, she found out he was even more interesting than she had seen in the news clips.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I got out of the book is just like she like talked to the whole family, like your dad and your uncles and all that to kind of get an idea of what your grandfather was like and everything else, and then all the memorabilia that your grandfather has,
Right.
which would be absolutely crazy. Do you just have a room full of his stuff? Don, is that, I mean, do you have like all his old tools, or did he save any of that stuff from his early years?
Yeah, he had a lot of he had his old belt with the tie off line woven into the belt. And you know, my brother has a Connex with a lot of the stuff in it. He has a hard hat from the Golden Gate Bridge. It was first
Really?
out on the
Wow.
West Coast. Hard
Yeah.
hat, kind of a leather shellacked thing. Yeah,
Wow.
he used his stuff. Uh, you know, he'd still be splicing if he had a need for any kind of rigging or towing or what have you. You know, he could still splice an eye and a
Yeah.
wire stuff. So yeah, old bridge, American Bridge badge from one of his projects. Not everything he ever had, a number of
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. You guys should, I mean, because there's a museum, correct? Is that museum still around? There's a picture of it in the book, or was that just an exhibit at a museum?
That was just an exhibit.
Okay.
The hometown has a little section with him, and actually, we and my family were talking about trying to come up with one that we could, you know, maybe make portable to go to events to show iron. You know, maybe there, you know, someday there's going to be an 80th celebration of these bridges, or 20. The one named after him is coming up on 20 in next be 20 years old open. So we have a lot we'd like to display, because the average person going to high school or what have you has no idea what a spud wrench is, or, you know, how it's used, or, you know, what it entails to build a bridge.
Yeah.
You know, so.
No, I would love to see that. I mean, that'd be cool to see like a traveling exhibit with all your grandpa's stuff. That'd be awesome to see. Because I'm a history buff, and I'm super into all like that. You know, I've kind of just been diving into all the old ironworking companies like the Bridge Company and Bethlehem Steel and all that. But yeah,
Right.
But I just got one final question here, Don, and then just kind of get out of here. So I ask everybody on the podcast is what advice would you give someone who's just getting into ironworking, or somebody who's thinking about becoming an iron worker? What advice would you give to those people?
Well, if you're a hard-driven, competitive person, um, and average intelligence, but you know, you'll have a great chance if you are in, as my father told me, and I'm sure my grandfather told him. You show up every day ahead of time, and you work hard every day, and people see that, you will eliminate at least 50% of the competition right there, you know. And unfortunately, that's still true today. If I go and talk to an apprenticeship class, tell them the same thing. I said, you know, I wasn't in your class yesterday, the day before, and the day before that, but everybody in here knows who the last person is to show up every day. And it's the same on the job. But if you got the right attitude and the drive, you can make a great career in the iron workers. And, you know, it's because of the union that anything I have, right? My daughter's in college because of the union. It's phenomenal. And I'm, you know, retired on a union pension, hopefully for a long time. My grandfather was retired 30 years on a union pension. He did really, really well. And I 30 years out of it, but I hope that,
well, you never know, Don. You never know.
I tell you, to be able to tell people, you know, somebody asks what you do for a living or what you did, what have you, it is immediately a prideful moment for me to say, I'm an iron worker. You know,
Absolutely.
It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. Amen to that, Don. Well, I appreciate your time, sir. And, I can't wait to put this out and let everybody hear it. I just think all these history and the stories of ironworkers are just super important. And you and your family are a big part of our history. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and to talk to me.
Thanks for the opportunity, man. I love sharing the word. I'm a
Yeah.
passionate.
Absolutely, Don. Well, you have a good night, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Paul.
All right. Talk to you later, Don. Thank you.